Welcome to Spinnovation. Today we have two guests. We have Katarina Björklund and Tomas Planstedt from Saab. Welcome, Katarina and Tomas.
Thank you very much.
And Katarina, you are the Vice President of Group Strategy at Saab. And Tomas, you are the Innovation Management Lead at Saab. And also, pertaining to actually what we're going to discuss today, you are a certified innovation manager, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
And I'm a innovation management lead at Combitech, but working for Saab.
Yeah, and maybe you can just explain sort of like what is Combitech and what is Saab. I guess people listening to this know about the Saab brand, but maybe it's more famous for cars and maybe even trucks, but not. You do a lot of other things, and you don't make cars anymore, right?
Katarina, I think you should describe Saab, and I might describe Combitech then.
Okay. Yeah, Saab is an aerospace and defense company, which have several different products and within mainly the defense area. We have the Gripen fighter, we have the A-26 submarines, but we also have remote digital towers, as well as underwater vehicles, autonomous and remotely piloted ones, as well as different kind of sensors and command and control systems. So we have a very, very broad portfolio and no cars anymore.
Yeah, but and that portfolio is also, I can only imagine, super high tech and very sophisticated.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely super high tech, and that's why it's so fun to be working here.
And also,
and Combitech is.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Also, I guess working at that bleeding edge of technology, I guess it requires some innovation skills as well.
It certainly does. Saab is a very, very innovative company. Already from the start, we had to do that to be able to be a smart company. And when we started in 1937, when it was founded, it was to support the Swedish defense forces with the different products, and the security of supply with a limited budget was definitely one of the things that made us smart and made us have to be innovative to be able to do that and to deliver what was necessary from a capability point of view.
And Combitech then?
Combitech, yes. It's technology consultants, fully owned by Saab, working a lot with both consultancies and solutions for cybersecurity and digitalization, among others, I would say. And I'm part of a division focusing on management consultants as well, where innovation management is my area.
And today's topic, and I don't know how many of the viewers that actually know about this, but I'm probably going to do many episodes on that particular topic, and that is that there now is an ISO standard for innovation, or rather innovation management, called I think ISO 56000 and some sub numbers onto that. And at least when I tell people about this, a lot of people is sort of like raising their eyebrows and sort of like, really, a standard, an international standard for innovation? How, does that really work? Because innovation is a lot about creativity and things that feels maybe rather unstructured and also works well when not too structured. But that's not really true. And we have to maybe differ between what is a good idea and what is a good way to manage that idea, the development of that idea. And I think, and that's why I wanted to have the two of you in this particular episode. We'll cover this standard somewhat, but what is most interesting is sort of like how you early on sort of like discovered this standard, got interested in it, and then built your own innovation strategy process around that standard, but also adopted it to your own business. And I think that's such an interesting journey. So maybe if we just shortly start, or Thomas, please. I think you told me once sort of like how you got into this.
Yeah, if we should start from the very beginning, I was asked during, I don't know what it's framed in English, but utvecklingssamtal in Swedish.
Yeah, like a development discussion with your boss, basically. How you want to develop within the company and your role and as a person.
Correct. And then I think it was back in 2012, and I got two questions. One was, how can we be better at our business intelligence? And the second question was, how can we get more ideas? And firstly, I didn't consider those to be connected to each other, but since the business intelligence is a way of forming your strategy, and innovation could be seen as a mean for implementing your strategy. And the first question is not perhaps how ideas, but rather why and what kind of ideas. So I think strategy is one important thing here. And when we started to work on innovation, I think it was back in 2014, it was mostly focused on ideas and idea management and idea management tools, basically. And we got aware that one tool was from Microsoft, and one of the users of that tool was Ericsson. And there was a white paper where they had Ericsson as a case, and then we got connected to Ericsson to find out more about how they use that kind of tool. But we also became aware that they didn't just have a tool, they had a lot more of let's say, a holistic view on innovation, where you have the direction part, where you could form your innovation strategy, but also capability things, where you have the tools as one example, but also competencies, roles, processes, etc. And later on also commitment part, where you discuss the leadership, the attitudes and values. And last but not least, action, where you actually do your experiments and adapt accordingly. So, and the guy we got connected to at that time was Magnus Carlsson, who has been heavily involved in the development of this ISO standard. At that time, he was responsible for innovation management at Ericsson Group functions. And I think he guided us in that direction, where we started to work according to those principles that later are stated in the innovation management standard ISO 56000. So even that when we started, we didn't know that it would later become an ISO standard. We start working according to those principles.
So it was basically just happenstance that you started to get interested at the same time as an actual standard was being developed.
Yeah, and it was a European standard as a predecessor, Central European and nomenclature, I don't know. And as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to become one of the first certified innovation management or innovation manager. And that was according to the European standard that later was the foundation for the ISO standard. So yeah, I would say that we were fortunate enough to got connected with Magnus and started to working together with him, and also together with Amplify Innovation that he has also been involved in the development of this standard.
And that's a company here in Sweden.
Correct.
Katarina, was you involved in this from the very beginning, or did Thomas just show up one day and say, you know, we need to standardize our innovation strategy and processes?
No, in fact, I moved from one of our business areas into group strategy around the time when Thomas described it. And the CTO we had at that time had listened to Magnus Carlsson during one of his speeches and realized that maybe we could improve what we are doing. As I said, we are really innovative, but we can always improve. And so I got the task to work on with this when I started at group strategy. And then I got Tomas, who was in the business area at that time, to work together with me, which was really a good start, and got the support, as Tomas described, by Magnus Carlsson and by Amplify and their CEO, and to understand and to learn. And for me, innovation was more of a new area at that time. So I hadn't been involved in it from this perspective.
And I think, just as a general reflection, and you might agree or not, but my experience is, from all the people that I met and interviewed before, is that a lot of people working with in some kind of an innovation capacity or an innovation management capacity, many of them really hasn't, you know, any professional education pertaining specifically to innovation. Usually you come from another background. It could be either a business background or an engineering background. And then maybe you're interested in these issues. And one day your boss says, yeah, we need to have someone in charge of innovation. Can you be our innovation manager? And you're sort of like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. But you stand there without really any foundation to work from. But and the way I understand it is that this new standard, because it is quite new, I think, was it last year that it became sort of like public and finalized, or?
I think the first part was published in 2019. And,
2 years ago now, yeah.
Yeah, and more is coming. And as a standard, I would also like to notify that it's a guiding standard. It's not.
Yeah, and we'll come to that, because I just wanted to say here that with this standard, it also becomes it's a practical or pragmatic framework for innovation managers, and with it also comes now the possibility or the opportunity to also being certified as an innovation manager. And I think it bears similarities to, I mean, back in the days, maybe you could become a project manager without any formal project management education. But now, now it had sort of like made the transition from a role to a profession. And it seems like we are on the same trajectory here with innovation, where sort of like it also goes from the role of innovation manager to actually a profession as a innovation management. And I think that's a super interesting development, kind of like a professionalization of the whole innovation guild community. And Thomas, you were going to point out, or you pointed out, that it's important to realize that this is not like the ISO quality standard, for instance, that came about almost 30 years ago, something like that, maybe 25 years ago, where you have to follow a certain set of rules. This is guiding principles, and there is 8 of them, and they focus on realization of value, future-focused leaders, strategic direction, culture, exploiting insights, managing uncertainty, adaptability, and the systems approach. And within each of those areas of principles, you get a lot of knowledge from this standard, because there's a body of knowledge with a lot of articles and videos and stuff that you can watch, and that will give you a almost like well, I'd say a solid foundation in best practices around these different areas. But please, Thomas, fill in here sort of like how you view this framework.
Yeah, I would say firstly, when I started looking into what is basically innovation, really, the first thing I was like I normally do, it was to search in Wikipedia what does actually innovation mean, and then I started to find, okay, is there any good literature to study it, to get to know it better. And at that time, you mentioned body of knowledge, and I would say it's not connected or it's not part of the ISO standard, but it's a really good source if you're interested in innovation or innovation management, and it's based on several categories with a lot of good articles or videos or books, etc., which is I wished that had been published at the time. And that is a Swedish initiative from the Swedish organization Innovationsledarna, who is an organization whose mission is to professionalize innovation management.
Okay, thanks for making that distinction. And I'll put in a link to them as well, and hopefully also to the body of knowledge. I think it's publicly available, but yeah, I'll see.
Yeah, that's correct. And as you mentioned, there are 8 management principles, which is the foundation for the standard. And then there is several parts of that standard that all relies on that 8 principles that you mentioned. And if you're going to be certified as an innovation manager, you're usually studying, at least in Sweden, this body of knowledge. And that is the, let's say, knowledge road. This is what you should be knowledgeable within, but you also need to show that you had some experience of working according to the knowledge that you have as well.
Yeah, and for the viewers here also, it might be interesting and useful to know that this body of knowledge that we're talking about, all the material is in English. So it's easily accessible, basically, for everyone in the world. But so clearly the standard, if nothing else, and if you're new to innovation management, it sort of like at least makes it very clear to you that you need to develop your strategy and acquire the right competence and tools to address these 8 different areas. And I think it's a great benefit for that, because I think many companies, and let's say they're not so mature at innovation, they probably do stuff within some of those areas, but not all of them.
Is it a question?
It's sort of like, please fill in. No, but no, I just wonder, am I correct in assuming that, you think?
I guess so. I would say we have been working hard to work according to the standard, implementing according to it and the principles. But I don't know how well it's let's say, became aware to other companies. But I think a lot of companies have a vague idea about what innovation is. And I think they are quite, let's say, they don't really know. They think that innovation is good, but I think they are a little bit confused in how should we act upon it? What can we do, basically? And there is a lot of, let's say, assumptions that it's, like you mentioned initially, that it's about creativity and you cannot command or steer creativity, but you can inspire and let's say you could lower the hurdles so it makes easier to be creative and stimulate them rather than steering with the hand.
And also, of course, I mean, creativity is certainly one part of it, but then also you have the after you come up with this brilliant idea, it's sort of like that's just the first step on a very, very long journey, especially for more complicated innovations like what you guys at Saab are doing. So you need to have tools and processes in place to actually making that journey from the idea to actual implementation, right?
Yeah, and we usually using an example about creativity, and perhaps it's also a little bit connected to Saab, and that is that Leonardo da Vinci had a creative idea about a helicopter back in 450 years ago or something like that. But that was a creative idea at that time. Later, when Igor Sikorsky was able to actually build the first prototype of a helicopter, it was an invention based on that creative idea, but it was still not an innovation according to us, because it also has to be able to basically create the intended value. So when he sold that helicopter to the intended user, and then it could deliver the intended value, then the creative idea went through invention to an innovation. So that was a journey about several hundred years, basically. So creative idea is not enough, but you need to have those as well.
Yeah, for sure. So now, dear viewers, you know now, and you're astonished by the fact that there is actually an ISO standard for innovation management. And you also, which maybe will calm you a little bit, knows that, okay, it's a very pragmatic approach to a standard that just advises you and give you the best practices for how to address the different areas. But when you came across this, then how were you thinking? Because I think, I mean, sure, it's like a big buffet of principles and advice on how to do things within innovation. But how did you apply it to your organization then?
Oh, it was a long journey, I would say. And it developed over time. Or do you agree, Katarina?
Absolutely. We definitely developed it over time. And I would say the framework you were talking about that Ericsson had with the 4 parts, I think was an important door opener for us to understand that we both need the direction, we need the capabilities, we need the culture, the commitment by the managers, and as well as doing the actions. So if you don't have one of these parts, then it's really difficult to be able to be successful. So therefore we have been working on the different parts that has been open for us, or has been, well, the easiest way to move forward into for the time being. So I definitely agree. We've had a long process and have been doing different things to be able to fill these different parts.
And that framework, I think, is central over the time, and it's partly, let's say, aligned with the innovation standard. But that was the framework that we started using back in 2014 or 2015. I don't remember exactly. And one of the key things is also actually what actually is innovation, and what is innovation to us, because when you say innovation, it can be all and nothing. It could be the process, it could be the output, it could be, let's say, a feature on a solution that something is innovative, for example. So in order to have fruitful discussion, and we are discussing the thing. We need to state a definition. What is innovation to us? And I think that is one central thing. And then there is also some, let's say, assumptions that might be provocative to some people, that innovation can be managed, that it can be learned. Some people think that we don't have those talents in our company, but we are, our firm assumption is that most of the people could be training products. They don't need to be talents or super talents from the very beginning. And of course, there is someone who isn't interested in innovation at all, but at least give them opportunity to decide that themselves. And also that culture is extremely important. And the culture for innovation, I would say, is like for all, let's say, discovery related things, when you're searching for something new, where you don't actually know what the result will become, you need to be curious, you need to have the courage, you need to think what if, and not only just, let's say, when you're working with delivery related items, you usually, okay, we have the assumption that we can make the plan, we can execute according to the plan and follow up according to that. And by the end, we will know that, okay, we have developed something at time at right cost. But when we are working with discovery related thing, and that's the same for research as well as innovation, I would say, is that you really can't say that from the very beginning. But you need to pass certain milestones. Okay, now we know enough to take the next step, and we need to adapt according to what we learn along the way. And that values and those attitudes and those behaviors are quite different from delivery related activities.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the tension or friction can occur, I guess, within organizations. And just going back to you, Katarina, and what Thomas said here also about culture. I heard someone say once that sort of like innovation comes from the top, in the sense that if the highest management doesn't buy into and 100% support innovation efforts, then it will never happen, regardless of how creative and brilliant the people in the company is. So what was your experience with that, Katarina?
No, I definitely agree. And that I would say that the high management, the top management, is definitely dedicated to innovation and see that as a necessary assets. However, they will have to balance with what is necessary to do regarding the delivery part of the company. Of course, as we have several customers and a huge backlog that needs to be delivered. So it has to be a balance, but they are definitely committed to being and becoming even more innovative. And what I think is also important, and what has been an eye opener for me in this is that as an engineer, as I have that background, you all normally think about doing things in the product area. You think of technology, and you don't think about what Tomas mentioned, like processes or business models, and how you work together with the customers, and how you can explore and provide them a better engagement in what you're doing. So there are so many areas that you talk about, the 10 types of innovation. That is something that I think that is something that I really burn for to be able to implement also within our company.
And I think I saw a number somewhere about, and just to repeat what Katarina said here to the viewers, there is this model, the company that sort of like promotes that model eludes me right now, but it's called 10 types of innovation. And product development or a new product is sort of like one of 10 possible innovation areas. And I think I saw a number sort of like where maybe 85%, that's 85% of innovation efforts go into making better products. and maybe only 5 or 6% of them actually succeed. But if you innovate in some of the 9 other areas, and maybe in some of them together in unison, then your chances for success is higher, and the chance that you're actually moving the needle is higher. So it makes total sense.
I think when you describe those 10 types, you can divide them into 3 different categories. You have the offering as a central part, and of course, if you don't have the offering, you have nothing to either configure or build experience around. So I think the key recipe is basically to have something from the offering part, something from the configuration part, and also something from the experience part. And the more of them that you address at the same time, the more impact your innovation will have.
So if we maybe we don't need to go into speak so much more specifically around the standard and such, and I'll link to more material around that standard. But just going back then to you guys and your company, where you sort of like you had at least something that looked like a reliable framework, but you had to bring that and adapt it to your own organization. How did that journey look like, and where does one start when doing that?
Ooh. I think we as we mentioned, we were on a journey from 2014, and we tried different things out. We did a situation analysis to find out, okay, how is the current situation when it comes to innovation at Saab? And that was laid as, let's say, a foundation for future work. We tried to use the systematic innovation approach, which we called it at the time, that we inherited from Ericsson, and try that in one of the business areas to find out, okay, how is the Ericsson way working at Saab? What can we learn from that? And I think we learned a little bit from that as well. And one of the key things was that actually innovation wasn't really on the agenda. There was no clear targets, there was no clear processes or clear governance. And that is, let's say, okay, this is what we would like to achieve over time. So we did a lot of things over the years and learned from what worked and what didn't work, and tried to improve on those things. And I think it's fair to say that we start implementing last year, basically when we established the governance organization, where we implemented the innovation greenhouse, and also, let's say, find a way to measure on innovation. So I think if we should be fair, we have been running and implementing it for a little more than a year. And it was a journey to learn before we start implementing, I would say.
And one thing that was important for us, I think, it was because I think Tomas and I, we had a clear view on where we wanted to go, but it was important for us to also put out some kind of a target for what would we like Saab to look like from an innovation perspective, to be able to also show others what could be done and what would be important to do. So I think that was also an important step for us, and to be able to kind of frame that objective, to be able to continue working on the different stuff we needed to do.
I think we were passionate enough to just, okay, we could easily agree that it was innovate or die, because nothing lives forever. But when we were asked, okay, but really, why should we do it? And then we said, okay, it's more or less innovate or die. Or then we got the question back, really? And then we need to be more clear and clarify the reason why and on what should we innovate. But to us, I think it was, we didn't need to have that clarification in order to commit ourselves to work on innovation. But in order to have the organization committed to it, we need to clarify a lot of things on why and what.
Can you give some examples of that? Because I can totally relate to it. You sort of like, you saw the light, but it's harder to get others to see the light. How did you make them to become believers?
Have we succeeded on that yet?
Well, maybe not everyone is proselytized, but anyways, I mean, you have at least managed to establish a new framework for innovation. And what was the rhetoric or the story you told people in order to convince them that, yeah, okay, we really should work in this way?
That's a very good question. I think we were able to point out what we wanted it to be, and to be able to start working on the journey, and trying to also show some kind of results on our way. One of the things that has been started during these years was to try to understand how we could partner with really small companies, with startups. As you know, within a big company, time isn't crucial, and not in the way it is for a small company that where a week or a month could be an eternity. So how could we meet them, and how can we take advantage of what they are doing to be able to use that within our company? Try also supporting them in their building their company. So there are several different things that has been ongoing, and I think more than maybe telling a story, just telling it, trying to do different kind of things. And we also
so implement sort of like, you start projects that are visible and that gets noticed and show people basically by doing.
And also being ambassadors for broadening the perspective of innovation, for example, that we're mentioning. And also, since we both have our background in research and technology, and that is the key area for, let's say, technology feasibility, and develop knowledge in that area. But when it comes to innovation, you also need to address the desirability or the customer part. And how can we be really good at understanding the customer value and also understanding the business value out of it? Because technology is not really a problem for Saab. It never has, and I don't foresee that it will never be either. But to broaden that perspective, to also look, okay, is there a customer having that problem, and how much is that customer willing to pay to get the need or opportunity solved? And I think we need to be a little bit better on that, because if we should be quite frankly, the Saab has been, let's say, trained to be feasibility experts. We haven't been trained to be desirability experts or business experts, because we had the Swedish customer who served the problem and also had the wallet for us to develop our portfolio as we have today. But that game plan has changed a lot, which means that we need to be good at all parts of it. So I think one key thing is actually to promote that innovation is more than just products and more than just technologies. Because in the technology company, usually you think of innovation as something that you're doing research or technology development upon. And of course, that's an important part, but not the only part. So I think that is one important aspect of it, to be an ambassador. I don't know if you agree on that, Katarina.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are definitely other ambassadors out in the business areas and the business units that we have been working closely together with to support them and for them to support us. So we are trying to spread the network and also having discussions with the different organizations to understand their needs and to discuss what they need and how we can support them and what they are seeing as their main problems, etc. So we have also tried to work together with the organization or through other people as well.
Yeah.
And also as part of this project or journey, you implemented a new KPI. So instead of return of investment, you introduced return on learning, ROL.
It actually isn't a KPI, but of course that's let's say an important message, because usually you use return on investment, of course. No, but we have started to measure. We mentioned that we had the framework where we had the direction as one factor, the capability as a second, and commitment as a third, and action as a fourth. So we have KPIs on the action part, where we're measuring the portfolio according to the 10 types and 3 horizons of growth, but also according to the process, how many problems have we been exploring and how many concepts have we developed. So the KPIs that we have at the moment as a start is based on the action, and you can say the portfolio is based on somewhat related to direction, of course. But of course, we are, our, let's say, strong assumption is that we need to focus on the learning along the way before you can tell anything that isn't more than just a guesstimation of an ROI. You need to also value what you learn along the way, because it's by building knowledge and reducing uncertainty, that's the key. So that is one thing that we are monitoring when you're executing an innovation project is what do we know and what do we don't, and what do we don't know, and what evidence do we have and what evidence do we need to develop. And we also think, okay, of course, if we can get an evidence that says confirmed yes, that's great, but also if we have an evidence that says confirmed no, or that there is some evidence in favor or good evidence in favor, that is also equally important, because usually you have those cliches, okay, fail cheap, fail fast. And that's a good thing, actually, if you can get a confirmed no, because then we have failed. And that's not a bad idea, because then we know, okay, that's not the direction we should invest further energy or time or money within. Then we can close that down and instead focus on the things that we have some evidence in favor for. But also, okay, what is still unclear? Those are the areas that we need to get some evidence that confirms that this is a good idea that might scale in the future.
And I think one of the first books that sort of like touched upon that and sort of like really was an eye-opener for me, even now it feels like maybe trivial for many people, but was the Lean Startup. And what I took away from there was basically not just learning per se, and they had this build, measure, learn loop, for instance, where you actually first have to figure out, what do I want to learn? How should I measure it? And what do I need to build in order to learn that stuff? That's super useful, I think, for almost any business. But also, if you are, for instance, if you are a startup, or it could also be easily if you are like a internally financed project, a development project of any kind. Usually, if you're a startup and someone invests in you, they also set up milestones. And usually it might look like, you know, in 12 months we'll do the product development, and then we'll have a big launch, and all the users will come to us. But what you actually, and 9 out of 10 fail with such a plan, because anything never ever goes according to plan. So instead of milestones, sort of like here's the UX thingy, and here's the backend technology, and here's the promotion material and so forth. Actually, what you should set up is learning milestones, and agree on what those should be, and then no one can be dissatisfied at the end of such a journey, and when all the money is over, and the project failed, because you reached your learning milestones, and that's what's important.
Yeah, exactly. And as Thomas clearly pointed out, failing or understanding that this is probably not a way forward is equally important as finding the things that you should continue with. Yeah. So I think that is a very important part of the learning journey you're on.
And it is kind of like when you're formulating it like that, the image I get in my head is sort of like we are standing in front of this bewildering maze or labyrinth, and there's only one way out on the other side. And what innovation really is about is to have a process to find that right way, not brute forcing it, but actually have a process to and the most efficient manner to find that way, really, and basically pruning off all those uninteresting or not solutions that doesn't work really, and I think that's what is given partly by the innovation framework, but also sort of like what should be in a process, I think, in every organization that is serious about innovation and want to innovate in the most efficient way, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And the way we are focusing or basing a lot of our efforts upon is basically what's called the 3 or perhaps the 4 lenses of innovation from IDEO, where you have the desirability, the customer part, the viability, the business part, and the feasibility, the technology part, you can say. And also the 4th might be the adaptability, that is, let's say, the context of the business model that you're trying to explore upon and develop new concepts within. So what we are trying to do is to reduce the uncertainty with respect to all those 4 lenses and learn along the way. And use that what we know as a, let's say, guide. Okay, what should we take as a next step? And you mentioned the startup, and I think that's a good way when you are in the, let's say, the solution part of the innovation. And I think it's equally important to focus on the problem part as well, to find and solve the right problem, so you don't start build, measure, learn on something that isn't relevant. Really. So what we usually do when we are working on innovation is, even if most ideas that we came across is based on a solution on something that might be interesting, but to back, okay, is this really a problem? And find out about the, let's say, is it a symptom of a problem, or is it actually the real problem, the cause of the problem? So we're attacking the right things. So I think we are working on both finding the right problem, but also later on the right solution. And you need to do that iteratively in order to actually find the innovation part. And to do that, we are using those 4 lenses. And okay, so what do we know with respect to them, and what don't know enough that we need to set up new hypotheses and do experiment to learn from.
What I think is important is that normally you don't have one way, or there isn't one possible only solution that is the one that will solve the problem and be the success of everything. You can solve a different real problems in so many different ways, and there are probably pros and cons with all and everyone. And I think that is also an important part of innovation, and within this problem space, understanding what the problem really is, and also in the solution space, looking into different areas, not just getting stuck in one and say, let's try that this, check whether this one will solve everything, and if doesn't, just move forward. So I think it's important to broaden the view when you are choosing and how to move forward.
Yeah. So the principle that we are working according is what we call the double diamond, and each diamond has a divergent part and then a convergent part. And the convergent part is the divergent part is where you're trying to find different variants of either the problem or the solution as well, and then find out, okay, is this a validated problem or invalidated problem, or when it comes to solution, okay, let's say we have a validated problem, this is worth solving, then finding variants of the solution and find the best solutions in the end of that process.
So it's not really the double diamond from design thinking necessarily you're talking about now.
Actually, we have integrated because when we started to be, let's say, talking about innovation and systematic innovation, and we talked about standards, people got quite bored, if we should be frank. And they start, okay, but I have heard something about design thinking, or I have heard something about lean startup, or I have heard something about business model canvas, etc. And then we thought, okay, if that is something that they could relate to, that wasn't that, let's say, boring as systematic innovation or standards, then we thought, okay, even if those are branded methods and there is no silver bullet, design thinking is the one and only, or lean startup isn't either the one and only, but they have different, let's say, strengths and weaknesses. So what we have tried is to find the best part of design thinking, find the best part of lean startup, and find the best part of business model. So we have combined that in what basically is a combination of all of those, and framed that with the double diamond, finding the right problem and later on finding the right solution. And I think the lean startup is very good on the solution part of that. Design thinking is all the way from the problem to the solution part. And the business model canvas is also addressing the business value out of it. So you can also, let's say, talking business logic with the management that has the money.
But it's also a great tool also for anyone involved. Even even if your main interest is maybe software development or technology, still also being sort of like it forces you to think about the business aspect as well. Kind of tool.
Yeah, and usually it's easier and cheaper to explore the desirability part. Because usually the technology side is let's say, that drives costs. So before starting to look into feasibility and invest in building up cost structures there, you can start exploring the desirability part first. And if there is a desirability, then you can switch to feasibility. And when you have both the desirability and the feasibility, okay, then we can look on the business part, because now we have, let's say, some knowledge about the customer, and we have some knowledge about the potential solution, what it will cost, and how much the customer is willing to pay. And if it's a positive net on that, okay, then you might have a good business as well.
You were speaking about confirmed yes and confirmed no, which I think is Was that taken from the standard or in any of these the other tools here we mentioned, or is this something you come up with by yourself?
No, not really by yourself. It's inspired a lot from Strategizer. They had an article about something called Innovation Project Scorecard, but we have tweaked that a little bit because there was something called Confirm No in that one, which is thought is very important because they had all those aspects, the lenses that we have talked about, and they had some, let's say, a scale from unclear to somewhat some evidence to good evidence to confirm no. Sorry, confirm yes. Yeah, and then we added okay, but if we look on the other aspect, so we added that side of the scale from, let's say, 0 to the negative side and also to the positive side. So it's inspired by Strategizer.
Yeah, but I like how you built upon it, sort of like living in a world of real numbers and then understand that there's also negative numbers or real positive numbers, and then and was it you that also said at one occasion that when you actually in your pipeline of projects, when you actually say no to one of them, that there actually must be a motivation for that as well, a good motivation for not doing it?
No, we've been talking about that. It's quite easy if you don't actually know enough. Then when you're uncertain, it's very easy to say no because you don't know. So we think it's a good approach if you're trying to say no, you need to qualify why are you saying no. And I think there is another twist on that as well that is called the VIP approach, where you can see...
it's called the...
VIP, VIP.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of saying no, you can say, okay, I can see a value into it, but I think we need to investigate and have a proposal on how to investigate to see, because the thing that you don't know enough about, okay, can you try that, explore that, make an experiment to see if that is true or not. And that is much harder to propose such an experiment than just saying no. So we think it's important to, let's say, make it harder to just easily say no to new, basically.
Make it harder to say no. That's I like that. I really like that. I think we are almost close now to an hour. I know that you guys have done a lot now on your innovation journey, but I'd like to just maybe touch upon some of the things that probably deserve much more time. But you mentioned you have a greenhouse, the innovation greenhouse, which is an internal process, right?
Yeah, it's internal innovation lab, you can say. And that started as actually me and a colleague of mine, Cecilia Unell, we got a task from the CTO of Combitech and the CIO of Combitech to actually came up with the concept for an innovation lab for Combitech employees in order to inspire them to work at Combitech. And once again, I got in touch with Magnus Carlson because I know that he had one foot in the academy and one foot in the industry, and probably should know a lot of things, good things to learn from, and some bad example as well to avoid. And one of the things that he stresses is that there is a lot of, let's say, initiatives that begins with X or ends with X, or a garage or something like that. And then I questioned, okay, but what is actually the impact of that? And perhaps not that much in general. Of course, there is good examples, etc. So basically, we got aware that there is a lot of initiative that hasn't, let's say, been good examples, because they end up in what's called innovation theater, something that looks like innovation, that is usually very interesting to recruit people to a company, but not actually be in the renewal factory for the new offerings or of the organization or the organization's offerings as such. So then we reasoned around that, and then we came up with a concept that we call the innovation greenhouse, where we're using the greenhouse metaphor, where the employees can bring seeds into garden beds that we are trying to develop into hardened plants that potentially would end up as new candidates for development and later deployment. Or if it's really, really bad, we'll end up in the compost. But compost is not necessarily garbage, because that can be nutrition for new ideas. You can learn from that, as we're talking about return on learning. And one of the favorite examples of a company that is extremely good at valuing, let's say, bad or learnings from bad experiments is the Finnish company called Supercell, that has developed games like Clash of Clans or Heyday. They know, since they are in the game business, there isn't something called good enough games. You need to have wow games. And if they think that one concept isn't good enough, they try to find out why isn't that good enough. And when they have found out why, then they are describing that for the rest of the company, and that occasion is celebrated with champagne. And when they later on have a success like Clash of Clans, then they celebrate with a beer. So they celebrate the learnings a lot more than the successes. And I think that's a brilliant way of looking on return on learning.
That's really, really strong signaling in that. I love that story. Before we conclude, what are your advice? I mean, you found great support or use of the content of the innovation standard or innovation management standard, but also you have also been pretty active in also then certifying innovation manager. I mean, you were one of the first, right, ever to be certified, Tomas.
Yeah, and that was when I got into this, I was completely, let's say, passionate about it. So when I saw the opportunity that it was a pilot study funded by Vinnova. That RISE would be the accreditation body, and there was Innovationsledaren who was the other part about the knowledge road. When that opportunity got to my awareness, I immediately made the colleagues that I had, okay, here's an opportunity to really have the possibility to both get educated and also have the possibility to get personal certification. So actually, I think we were 11 in the first batch from the pilot study, and I think 3 of us was from Saab or Combitech in that. And later on, there has been more colleagues that has been certified. And I think it's no matter if you're part of Saab or Combitech or whatever, it gives some, let's say, legitimacy for, as you mentioned, it's not only a role, it's a profession. And I think if you're interested to work with innovation, that's an excellent opportunity to get a personal certification. So
And now you're speaking from sort of like us as persons and individuals and employees, but also from an organizational perspective. What is the value of certifying your personnel or hiring certified personnel?
From my perspective, if I may, is that it's I have heavily relied on Tomas and his colleagues on how to build the standard, how to move forward, what to think about, where to start, etc. So I have good, very good. Well, it feels good to have that knowledge within the company, and to be able to build on that when we are moving forward. So I think that it is important. But if you would like to start, maybe you shouldn't start with just writing or trying to add all of the different parts within the standard. Maybe you should start in some area, start to where you want, what is important for you in the company to do. Is it the most important part of being broader in what you're doing in the actions, or is it the return on learning that is the most important part? But slowly build the different parts of the standard in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to just implement everything from day one and hoping that everyone shall adapt.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we were talking about the 8 innovation management principles. And I think the 3 first that you should look into is the first one that is realization of value, to understand it's about that, and also about exploiting insights. So you're finding the relevant problems to solve. And also the 3rd is managing uncertainty. So you're not avoiding uncertainty, because most organization is trained to avoid and be risk avert in a huge sense. So if you start with value, insights, and managing uncertainty, I think you have a good start, and then you can add on the other principles later on.
That's a really great concluding advice. I know you guys have a lot more knowledge to share. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I'm just super grateful to have you guys here. It was very educational for me, and I hope the viewers also, or I'm sure the viewers also felt it was the same. And I'll put in some links in the description below on where to find more information about the innovation standard, and also how the certification process looks like. Because I feel adapting this standard, this is not a board decision as such, sort of like should we or should we not adopt the standard. This is about having something to lean on when you develop a company's innovation strategy. And then if you allow your personnel to get educated within this area and maybe certified as innovation managers, now I'm sort of like exaggerating, but it's you will never need to hire another innovation consultant after that. They will be within the walls.
Right, Katarina.
Am I exaggerating or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
I'm an innovation consultant myself, so I'm basically selling myself short here. But that's what I really believe, because the body of knowledge in that certification process is really quite broad and deep.
Yeah.
And so that's
really good
that's
course.
also,
sure.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I wish you a good day. Again, super thanks for showing up here on Spinnovation, and I hope to talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.